Writing your dissertation while parenting is indeed a balancing act. As a faculty member during COVID, I was literally at home with my daughter all day, who was a year and a half at the time. What we did is that in the evenings, I started to become an evening writer. Even though previously, when I did my doctoral program, I only wrote in the mornings. So sometimes you have to shift, right? Time management looks different for different people. So you have to recognize that and just agree that, hey, time management, I will figure out, but I just have to figure out what looks right for me given the season I am in. On tonight's episode from ABD to PhD show, we're going to talk about and dive into one of the most challenging and courageous paths that I see for doctoral students, and that is writing your dissertation while parenting. If you've ever written a paper for class while holding the baby monitor by your side, or scheduling Zoom meetings around feeding times, or trying to figure out how you're going to get your 3 kids to gymnastics, basketball, and track, but you only have one car to do all this and make all this happen, and you still need to write, if that's you, you're going to want to watch this episode, because I'm going to talk about some strategies that you can implement as a parent while writing the dissertation. My name is Dr. Ramon Goings, and I'm founder of Done Dissertation, and we have helped over 150 doctoral students write and defend their dissertations successfully. Today's episode From ABD to PhD show is sponsored by our Velocity Coaching Program, which is dedicated to students who are ready to move now to finishing their dissertation quickly by implementing our proven strategy and process and getting the coaching, writing feedback, and support in order to finish quickly. And so if you're looking for that type of support, you can visit our website at www.velocitydissertation.com to learn more about our program and to schedule and apply to work with us in the Velocity Pro Coaching Program. So let's get into today's episode, because I want to talk about all things around writing the dissertation while parenting. One thing I know for sure, you all are going to have to recognize quickly, if you haven't already, that writing your dissertation while parenting is indeed a balancing act. And so one of the things that I have heard from so many students, what you see here pictured, is that somehow they say, Dr. Goings, I need to find balance with writing and everything else I have going on. And I would say yes. So when we think about and talk about balance, what I want you to recognize is that balancing is an act, but in some ways, and this may be contrary to what other folks may suggest to you, I find that actually balance is a myth. It's very hard to achieve, because at any one point in time, something's going to take a priority. So it's no longer necessarily about the myth of finding balance. It's about how do I create synergy and integration amongst all the various responsibilities that I have. And so one of those things that you're going to have to do is let go of perfection, because balance has rhythms. And so you're going to have to learn and quickly embrace that you're going to start dealing with those rhythms, understanding when those rhythms happen for you, what takes priority when, and then kind of going back and forth in between. However, let me show you an example of the way I was thinking about this when I wanted to kind of teach this concept as the way I was going about this. So imagine, right? And excuse y'all for my drawing. I'm not an artist by any means of the imagination, but I want y'all to kind of get a picture of what I'm thinking, right? And so let's just say this is you, right? We're going to take our little stick figure, right? This is you. And somehow you were tasked with the obstacle of tight roping. So we're going to have our little rope. We're going to have our little bit of rope here. You're tasked with tight roping to the other side. And we'll just give this a little, let's say this is our finish line, right? And what ends up happening for many of us, right, is that in our minds, and what would happen, right, is that as if you're someone who's doing this tight roping, we would expect for our path to very, very much like this. So each of these dashes represents our path. In many ways, our path would be linear, right? And so when we're initially thinking about that, this is what the path will be. And a lot of times when we're trying to write our dissertation while balancing everything else, including parenting, this is what in our minds it should look like. But this is why I often say that this version of getting to the finish line is indeed a myth. It is very hard to achieve. However, what the journey actually more so looks like, let's just say, for instance, down below, we're going to do a revised version of this. Let's say we'll say U 2.0. We have the same rope. And sorry, y'all, for the drawing, just doing this quick hand. We have the same finish line. So we have everything is still the same. But really, what the journey looks like to reach what you all would kind of define as balance, the path might look like this. Things are going good. Uh-oh, things go down. Losing my balance a little bit. I reclaimed it, started to figure things out. Wait a minute, something happened there. I get down, and then finally I make my way to the finish line. And so what we can think about is that these dips in time might represent, in this case, I'll do this in a different color, might represent, let's say your chair leaves. That can sometimes throw things off, right? Maybe sometime you're in a season where you're doing, kids to college. There might be another time where, you want to do something, but then, you're trying to balance the promotion at work and then kids events. So a lot of times we're going to have these things that get in the way. But what you can recognize is that we still make it to our goal. But sometimes we have to think about and plan for what are we going to do when we experience some roadblocks that might impact our ability to balance everything. And so, for some of us, what that might mean is making sure that we have conversations with our family. We might need to make sure that, we know the chair is going to leave. So I plan for that. And literally situations like that happen all the time. That's why we created a training called Design Your Done Dissertation. If you want access to it, you can just scan the QR code here because we want people to be able to create the plans that they need in order to finish their dissertation. And so this particular training does that for you. So scan the QR code or you can go to www.designyourdissertation.com to learn more about it. But this is why we created it because we know that sometimes chairs might leave the institution. But when you're a parent, we just know that sometimes there are going to be situations like, for instance, we have this opportunity where our kids are going to college where, hey, the dissertation may not be number one priority, but it might have to be number two as a backup to getting the kids to school, right? So that there's going to be an ebb and flow, right? So if the kids are going to college, it's probably happening in August, maybe July, you're getting them ready to send. So things might get a little hectic around that time because that's what you have to do. But you recognize that once I get them to school, I can get back into the flow of things. So like really being strategic and mapping that out is going to be so important and something that we have found from our velocity clients who are parents that what they're doing consistently is like finding this synergy and integration because again, we find that having this more direct and linear path that's on the top version is just extremely difficult to achieve when the true thing is that the reality is more so like this version here. This is what reality looks like. And the quicker we come to the recognition that this is my reality, the faster we finish the process. We've seen it over and over again from hundreds of students, but this is sometimes the thing that separates those who finish from those who don't, is just their ability to think through the balancing. So this is a one aspect, right? As you're thinking about being a parent while writing your dissertation, is figuring out what does the balancing act need to look like for you in your situation. So with that said, the next point I want to talk about is somewhat related to balance, right? But it's on another important topic. And that topic, which you will see come up on your screen here, is time management. This is something that outside the literature review, the other question I get the most is around how do I manage my time and competing priorities? And look, if we think about the clock, right, we all only have the same, 24 hours in a day that we can do something. And here I'm picturing the 12-hour clock, but this is all we have, right? And so we have to figure out ways to maximize our time. And a lot of us go into writing the dissertation thinking that, either I can give a little bit of time or I have to take all of my time. And what I've come to learn while working with so many doctoral students is that there is somewhat of a middle point. And what I would suggest is that as you're thinking about this, we all only have the same amount of time, right? We all have the same amount of hours. But maybe what you recognize is like, hey, maybe for my dissertation, I need to, what would be a good time for me is like, maybe I'll write 1 hour a day. And we look at the clock looks very open. But by the time you put in, sleep, you got to take the kids to a couple events, maybe let's say from 6 to 9, right? We'll take this little time block here. If we kind of shade this in, get my highlighter, if we shaded this in, this might be the time where, you're doing kids, family stuff. So maybe this time is off limits. So maybe I don't have time to do anything during that block. Okay. So maybe that's, parenting time, time with kids, etc. So we're gonna make sure that we do that, right? So I'm gonna put this in. We know this is parenting. Y'all forgive me, we're doing this live, so trying to do this and make sure everything goes well is what we're trying to navigate here. And so, as we're thinking about this, we have the parenting aspect, right? But maybe you're still trying to find that hour, and at 9 o'clock, you maybe you recognize that from 9 to 12. Maybe that's the time for you and your spouse, right? That might be time for just what I call adult time, time to relax, time to unwind, right? So this time frame might be taken. Again, I'm just highlighting to show you like that time's gone. So maybe we know that this is for spouse time, spouse slash personal. But what some of us forget to recognize, we have all this other time, and we got to work in here, right? So, amidst of, say we put in work in here, you may find that truly you probably have about three hours of true like open time that you could dedicate to other things that you feel are not a priority. And sometimes when folks are thinking about the dissertation, you might feel like the dissertation needs to happen, during this entire, 6 hour gap. So I get a lot of students that say, "Oh my God, I need to write during this whole time right here." It's not necessarily the case. What we found from working with our students a lot of times is that maybe that 1 hour that you're going to dedicate might be broken up into 15-minute pieces. So maybe, I recognize that, I don't know, 12 to 12:15. All right. And then maybe 2 to 2:15. And you start to piece it together, you know, 4 to 4:15. All right. And then maybe, 5:30 to six. Maybe I'll get another writing session in. So you might get a little over an hour total. So a lot of times when we think about time management, we just have to think a slightly different about how we're approaching. We need to start thinking more so about how do I insert and make sure that the dissertation takes priority. Because what happens too often is that we let everything else take priority and the dissertation takes the back burner. And that's the reason why you might be stuck in the same position right now that you were last year. And this is why we created the velocity program to help. And again, we use the term velocity to give you the momentum to move through this thing quickly. I mean, we're always looking for students who are ready to act now and get things done and are willing to invest in themselves to do so. And this is what's going to become very important as you're thinking about how do I map this out and how do I figure out what does my time frame look like? What does my time management look like? Because this does look slightly different for each of us based on where we are in our journey. When I was a doctoral student, I didn't have children. So I had a busy job as a teacher. And then I went to higher ed at one point. And so I would write in the mornings sometimes. And then sometimes I wrote in the evenings. But as a faculty member during COVID, I was literally at home with my daughter all day, who was a year and a half at the time. And so, I was writing at that point, trying to get tenure. And what I had to learn is that, hey, I got to support Leah and what she's doing. But then at some point, what we did is that in the evenings, I started to become an evening writer, even though previously when I did my doctoral program, I only wrote in the mornings. So sometimes you have to shift, right? Time management looks different for different people. So you have to recognize that and just agree that, hey, time management, I will figure out, but I just have to figure out what looks right for me, given the season I am in. If this is resonating with you, someone let me know. And if you're watching this on a YouTube channel or on our LinkedIn, make sure that you follow us and subscribe. Especially on our YouTube, we found that like 95% of folks now who watch our videos are not subscribed. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you know when new content is coming out. And so another aspect of this I want us to consider when we're thinking about how to be a parent and balance, the writing the dissertation and parenting, is that we have to lean into our support system. And so what I have here pictured is just an imaginary dumbbell, right? Sorry, y'all. Again, I'm no artist. I'm just out here just trying to show y'all and give y'all a visual of the concepts that I'm thinking about, right? And so let's imagine, right, we have this dumbbell, and this is you. I'm going to draw a stick figure of you. Let's say our dumbbell is 100 pounds, but your max is only 50 pounds. So because of that, you're not able to lift the burden of what we have defined as this weight is our dissertation. However, there's another way to do this, but many students stay stuck at this point because they feel like they have to do it themselves. And that's not true. The greatest people I know in society have gotten help in some form or fashion through a coach, through a mentor, through someone to help guide them if their approach is not getting them or yielding them the results that they want. So when you see this kind of play out, a lot of times we will stay stuck. And this is for someone I would call in this boat. This is actually someone who I might define as being ABD, all but dissertation. They stay doing this because of, for whatever reason, they don't want to see or do anything different. But again, there is another way to do this. And so let's take, for instance, we might have this same dumbbell. And again, I'm just going to quickly draw this one out. And let's say, for instance, we know it's still 100 pounds. So nothing changed about it, right? And again, this represents our dissertation. But let's say now in this situation, there's you. And then you say, you know what? I'm going to be smart. And you're going to say, help to somebody, right? And so you're going to yell and signal like, hey, I need some help. I need somebody that's going to help support me in this. And as you're going through this, you recognize that, oh, I need help. Now what happens is this is what transforms the experience for many students, is that once you signal, I need help, next thing you know, it comes your way. Maybe you might have maybe your parent might be helping. Maybe it might be a friend. And in our example, that's in the black, more on the left side, we knew that we only have a max capacity that we can take on of 50 pounds. And so again, our capacity does not change, right? And so you still have max 50. But now, because you've gotten help and you recognize the power of getting help, what ends up happening in this case is that you recognize now that I only have 50 pounds, but my parent, maybe my mom or dad or someone, they also have a 50-pound capacity. And maybe my friend, they're in the season where they have a 120-pound capacity. So now the fact that I have sought and secured help is the difference from me being ABD or getting the help that I need to finish, because I now have reached and gotten resources from other folks to help supplement and augment what I have going on. And so how this looks is that this might be you getting help with childcare, right? So maybe one of our clients, shout out to Dr. Hassey, congratulations on defending your dissertation. I remember when she was writing her proposal, she would have it set up where she had some, childcare support so that on Saturday she can go write for 3 hours in the library. So that is a way to get the support, again, to give you more capacity as a parent. For some of us, it might be outsourcing laundry. Like literally, we just came back from a vacation and that was one of the things we did. We had so much laundry. It's like, look, we don't have time to do it all. We want to outsource it this time to get, have someone else do it. So outsource laundry might be a route for you. For some of you all, it might be outsourcing, groceries, like going and using Instacart. Like there are so many ways to create this space where you have capacity building. And this is literally the people who are what we call DDs. And that means someone who has a done dissertation. This is the difference, that they actually secure help from other people to get the goals that they want. If you are still doing the same thing and continue to be stuck and staying in this ABD status, that is not serving you. You have research to do. You have research that's going to impact the lives of others. There's no need to be so stuck in your own ways that you're not getting to the goal that you want to get to. So again, this is something that's going to be really important as you think through the dissertation process, being a parent in particular. This is a unique challenge that as parents we take on because there is so many other things that we have to do. And then before we get into the last point that I want to share with you all, if this is resonating with you, let me know in the comments. If you have questions, let me know. And if this is something that you're like, hey, I need someone to help me think through this and help me find the balance and help me achieve my done dissertation, I'd invite you to schedule a consultation with us and fill out our application by going to www.velocitydissertation.com. You can learn more about our Velocity program, how we can help you get done, and then complete application to see if we're a fit for what you need to get through the rest of your journey writing your dissertation. So now when we think about it, and the last thing I want to talk about today is thinking through our involvement of the family. That's going to be key. There's nothing that we can do in this situation, but we have to involve our family to some extent in this process. And so again, kind of going back to the board, if you think about it, here's how I kind of see the journey, right? So right now we kind of have, again, the journey as we see it, right? We're, this is in this case, let's say this is you, this is maybe your spouse, and let's say this is K1, so kid 1, K2, kid 2. Let's just say here's a situation. And there's this journey that you're going on to graduate. So a lot of times what happens and what will end up, happening for a lot of folks we see who come through our program is that sometimes you get the question from the kids, saying, "Why are you working on your dissertation so long? So why are you working so much?" If you gotten this question, let me know in the comments, why are you working so much? Like we get, as parents, we get that question from the kids because they don't understand, right? We know that for certain that they don't get it at all the times, but a lot of times it's because of our own communication. But they ask this question, why do you work so much? And so for many folks, what will happen is that when you get that question of why do you work so much for your kids, the first thing that happens is that you go into parent guilt, mom guilt, dad guilt, like, oh my God, I'm not giving the kids the time that they need because I'm focused on this other stuff. But one thing that I think needs to happen more, there needs to be more involvement in the family and more conversations need to happen so that when you get that question from your kid or someone about why are you working so much, you recognize and think through, and I'm going to just kind of take our bubbles down here, just have more space to write out the response, is that you might say, you know, maybe you'd say, my dissertation will put our family in a better position. Put our family in a better position. So this is something that I want you to consider. Like, you need to have responses for this. You know, again, it just will put us in a better position to do the things that we want to do. And a lot of times we found from working with our clients is that the more conversations that you have with, children around what's happening with the dissertation process, the easier it is for them to understand, and then they become part of the journey. One of the things, if you go in our YouTube channel and in our clients success playlist, there is an interview I did with Dr. Seneca Troutman, who is a former client in the Velocity program, and she talked about, which was so brilliant. She talked about how she got her kids so involved that they were asking questions because they knew that there were incentives tied to them. So, like she said, for instance, one of the incentives, like we would go to our favorite restaurant once I finished the chapter. So it was in their kids' interest to ask, "Hey, mom, when are you finishing that chapter? Because I'm trying to go to XYZ place." Like, that is the type of stuff that you have to do and be creative with doing so that you can get what you need out of the dissertation process. And so with that, I wanted to share those things with you because a lot of you all are balancing, right, being a parent and writing the dissertation. And we know that some of you may have younger kids. I know some of you all are putting multiple kids through college. And then you're recognizing, like, hey, I am stuck on my dissertation, but I'm giving to everyone else. What you're going to have to recognize, just like what they say on an airplane, is that you first have to put your oxygen mask on first before you provide it to anyone else that's next to you. And then the flight attendant always comes back by the parents. I was just on a flight recently, and they did this when we had our daughter with us. And he came back and said, "Mom, Dad, make sure you put yours on first." And they kind of walked past. That is what's going to need to happen for you. You're going to have to put your mask on. So what that might look like is you actually going to get some help and some support in investing in that, because there's no need to be stuck because of, like, oh, I'm not going to invest my time, any money to get help when your way has not served you in the best way that you want it to. Because again, you have so much impactful work to do with your research, and I just hate for you to be stuck because of just you getting in your own way. And this is why we created the Velocity program, to help motivated students who want to finish but just need a proven process and a system in order to get to the finish line. And so if you want to be one of those people who join our network of alumni who have gotten that done dissertation, make sure that you connect with us. You can scan the QR code that's here on your screen, or you can go to www.velocitydissertation to learn more about our program and to apply to work with us so we can see if we are the best fit to help you get to the finish line. And with that said, let me know if this has resonated with you in the comments. Let me know. And the best thing you can do for me is share this out with colleagues who, you think would get value out of this. And then most certainly, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button. LinkedIn, if you add us on there, make sure you add us as a friend. Add me as a friend at Dr. Ramon Goings. Again, I want to connect with as many folks as possible, and we want to make sure that we further the infrastructure of research, and we don't want you all sitting in ABD land because of not having the support and structure you need to finish. And so with that said, I want to say thank you so much for watching this episode for ABD the PhD show. And until next time, I wish you a done dissertation. Take care.